The auction block stood in Redemption Creek's dusty square like a judge's bench. Seraphina Bell gripped her worn cotton dress as men shouted numbers around her. The afternoon sun pressed against her shoulders. Her breath came shallow. Banker Cornelius Grimm held a wooden gavel like a weapon. His voice cut through the dry air. Each bid felt like stones thrown at glass. $50 from Morrison. Big Pete Morrison spat tobacco juice into the dirt. His eyes crawled over Seraphina's frame. She fixed her gaze on the distant mountains. The peaks stood silent against the pale sky. 75 from Jenkins. The crowd pressed closer. Sweat beaded on weathered faces. Seraphina's hands trembled. 3 weeks ago, she had been sewing curtains for Mama Ruth. Now Ruth lay buried beneath prairie grass, and Seraphina stood like livestock at market. 100 from Morrison. Pete's laugh scraped like rusty metal. Seraphina's stomach turned. She had seen the bruises on the girls who worked his saloon, purple shadows that spoke of fists and worse. The gavel rose. Her heart hammered against her ribs. $500. The voice came quiet from the crowd's edge. Every head turned. Silence stretched like pulled wire. Josiah Whitmore stepped forward. Dust clung to his dark coat. His hat brim shadowed eyes the color of winter sky. The crowd parted around him like water around stone. Grimm's face went pale as churchyard marble. The gavel shook in his grip. "Did you say 500, Whitmore?" Joe nodded once. His boots made no sound on the packed earth. He stopped before the platform and looked up at Seraphina. Something in his gaze steadied her breathing. "Ma'am," the first gentle word she had heard all day. Grimm's recovery came quick, too quick. His smile spread thin as paper. Sold to Josiah Whitmore. The banker's gavel fell with finality. Pete Morrison cursed and kicked at the dirt. The crowd began to disperse. Joe pulled gold coins from his coat pocket, real gold that caught the light like captured sun. Grimm's eyes widened at the sight. Joe leaned close and whispered something that made the banker's face drain of what little color remained. Grimm nodded rapidly and pocketed the coins with shaking fingers. Joe offered his hand to help Seraphina down from the platform. His palm felt rough with honest work. Calluses told stories of rope and leather and long days under open sky. "We need to talk." His wagon waited at the square's edge, clean and well-maintained. The horses stood calm in their traces, good animals treated with care. Seraphina climbed onto the bench seat. Joe settled beside her and took the reins. The wagon rolled forward through streets lined with watching faces, some curious, some disapproving, all measuring. The town fell behind them. Prairie stretched ahead like an ocean of grass. Wind moved through the stems with sounds like distant water. Seraphina's shoulders began to unknot. "You're wondering what I want?" She nodded. Speaking felt impossible with her throat so tight. "Marriage of convenience. Nothing more unless you choose it." The words hung between them. Seraphina studied his profile. Strong jaw, weathered skin, hands steady on the reins. "Why?" "I need respectability. You need protection. Simple truth. No pretty lies or false promises." Something about his honesty eased the knot in her chest. "What happened to your guardian?" Mama Ruth died in her sleep 3 weeks ago. Mr. Grimm came the next day with papers. Said she owed gambling debts. Joe's jaw tightened. "Ruth gambled." "Never. She said cards were the devil's picture books." The wagon wheels turned steadily. Joe's silence stretched long as shadow. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge sharp as winter wind. "Grimm's a liar." They crested a low hill. Joe's ranch spread below them like a promise. Neat buildings, good fences, cattle moving lazy through green pastures, men working with purpose instead of desperation. "It's beautiful. Built it from nothing. Every board and nail." Pride colored his words. Not boastful pride, but the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The wagon rolled down toward the ranch house, a simple structure, but solid, built to last. Joe's men touched their hat brims as the wagon passed. Their faces showed respect instead of fear. A Mexican vaquero, two former soldiers still young but marked by war, a grizzled old cowboy with kind eyes. All of them outcasts in their own way. The wagon stopped before the house. Joe climbed down and offered his hand again. Serafina accepted the help. Her legs felt unsteady on solid ground. "You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't press for more than you're willing to give." She looked up into his face, saw truth there along with something else. Loneliness, maybe, or recognition of shared wounds. "And if I say no, then I'll take you wherever you want to go. But you'll have nothing. No money, no protection, no future." Hard truth spoken soft. Serafina looked back toward town. Grimm would be there. Pete Morrison would be there. Men who saw her as property to be used. She looked at Joe's ranch, at his respectful workers, at the man himself standing patient as stone while she decided her fate. What do you get from this arrangement? A wife who can read and write. Someone who can help me deal with town business. Respectability among folks who matter. And what do I get? Safety. A name that means something. A chance to build a life instead of just surviving one. The wind moved through the grass around them. Somewhere a meadowlark called clear and sweet. Serafina made her choice. "When?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing. Preacher comes through on Sundays." She nodded. Joe showed her to the house. Clean rooms, good furniture, a kitchen that gleamed with care, her own bedroom with a lock on the inside of the door. "No one enters without your permission." Sunday came with clear skies and calm wind. The preacher spoke his words over them in Joe's front parlor. Serafina wore her best dress. Joe wore a clean shirt and his finest coat. The ceremony felt businesslike as signing papers. But when Joe slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, something shifted. She became Serafina Whitmore, a woman with a name that carried weight. The preacher left with his fee and his blessing. Joe's men returned to their work. Serafina stood in her new home and wondered what she had chosen. That evening she explored the house while Joe worked in his study. Behind the kitchen she found a door she had not noticed, locked tight. Her curiosity stirred like embers in cold ash. Through the keyhole she glimpsed papers tacked to walls, the shape of weapons hanging in shadow. Her blood chilled. What kind of man had she married? The locked door haunted Serafina's thoughts like smoke that would not clear. 3 days passed in careful politeness. Joe left early each morning, returned at sunset with dust on his clothes and silence in his eyes. They ate breakfast across from each other, spoke of weather and cattle prices. The space between them stretched wide as the prairie itself. Serafina found refuge in the ranch ledgers. Numbers told stories that voices would not. Feed costs, cattle sales, wages paid fair and on time. Every entry written in Joe's careful hand. The books revealed a mind sharp as winter wind. Profits invested wisely. Debts paid promptly. A business built on solid ground instead of sand. She reorganized the scattered papers, created systems where chaos had lived. The work steadied her hands and quieted her racing thoughts. Joe found her bent over the ledgers on Thursday evening. His shadow fell across the pages. She looked up to find him studying her work. "You changed the filing system." It was hard to find anything. This way shows patterns, seasons, profit margins. He leaned closer. His finger traced the neat columns she had created. Approval flickered in his expression. "You read my handwriting better than I do." "Mama Ruth taught me numbers along with letters, said a woman needed both to survive." Smart woman. The first real conversation they had shared. Serafina's pulse quickened. Joe pulled out a chair and sat beside her, close enough that she caught the scent of leather and sage on his clothes. "Show me what you see." She opened the ledger to spring entries, pointed to the patterns emerging from organized chaos. "You're losing money on feed. Paying too much because you buy small amounts. Buy in bulk during harvest season, store it properly, save 30%. Joe's eyes widened. He studied the numbers with new respect. What else? Your breeding program. You're keeping too many bulls. Sell half. Keep the best. Use the money for better grazing land. They worked until lamplight flickered low. Joe asked questions. Serafina answered with confidence born of careful study. The wall between them began to crack. Friday morning brought new rhythm. Joe asked her opinion on a land purchase. Serafina studied the surveyor's map and pointed out water rights issues. Joe nodded and set the papers aside. I'll look into that. She began joining him for ranch inspections, watched him work with horses that would buck other men into next week. His hands moved sure and gentle. Voice stayed calm when others would shout. The Mexican vaquero Carlos treated her with courtly respect. The young soldiers Hank and Billy tipped their hats and called her ma'am. Old Tom, the cook, insisted she taste his biscuits and tell him they were better than any fancy restaurant. All of them bore invisible scars. Carlos had lost his family to bandits. Hank carried a limp from Gettysburg. Billy's stutter marked him as different in a world that punished difference. Tom's hands shook from whatever he had seen in the war. Joe gave them all sanctuary, purpose, respect. The locked door began to matter less. The man who built this place mattered more. Saturday evening, Joe taught her to ride. Not side saddle like a lady, but astride like someone who meant business. The horse responded to her uncertain commands. Joe's steady voice guided her through the fear. Feel the rhythm. Don't fight it. Let the horse do the work. She found the balance, felt the power of the animal beneath her. Freedom opened like wings in her chest. They rode to the ridge overlooking the valley. Sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wind carried the scent of grass and distant rain. It's beautiful up here. Come here when I need to think. What do you think about? Joe's hands tightened on his reins, his gaze fixed on the horizon where mountains met sky. The past, the future, what they cost. Secrets moved in his voice like shadows underwater. Serafina waited for more. None came. Monday brought visitors. Joe cleaned up extra careful, put on his best shirt and newest hat. Serafina wore her blue dress with the pearl buttons. Where are we going? Cattlemen's Association meeting. Time they accepted me as an equal. The meeting convened in Redemption Creek's largest saloon. Smoke hung thick as regret. Men in expensive suits sat around tables that had seen better days. Their voices carried the weight of money and power. Joe entered with his hat in his hand, respectful but not servile. Serafina walked beside him, her chin high despite the stares. Grim sat at the head table. His smile showed too many teeth. Well, Whitmore's brought his bride to show off. Heat rose in Serafina's cheeks. Joe's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I'm here to apply for membership. My ranch qualifies by every measure. Does it now? Grim's voice dripped false sweetness. Other men shifted in their chairs. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded along with Grim's performance. 500 head of cattle, 2,000 acres, profitable 3 years running. And what makes you think you belong with civilized men? The question hung in the air like a noose. Joe's hands clenched into fists. Serafina stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore's ranch employs 12 men at fair wages. He pays his taxes promptly. His cattle are healthy and well managed. His word is his bond. She turned to face the room. Let her education ring in every syllable. If civilization means honoring contracts and treating workers with dignity, then Mr. Whitmore is the most civilized man in this room. Silence stretched thin as piano wire. Grim's face flushed red as fresh blood. The association has standards. Breeding matters. Then you should be honored to accept a man who builds instead of steals. The words cut deep. Grim's eyes went dangerous. Other men stirred uneasily. Some nodded approval. The tide began to turn. All in favor of accepting Whitmore's application? 5 hands rose, then 3 more. Not enough, but not insignificant. Motion denied. Grimm's gavel fell with finality. Joe touched his hat brim and turned to leave. Serafina followed without a word. Outside the saloon, she found her voice. "I'm sorry, I made it worse. Number U made it better." Joe helped her into the wagon. His touch lingered on her hand. "How?" "You showed them who you are, who we are together." The ride home passed in comfortable silence. Something had shifted between them. Walls crumbled like autumn leaves. That night, Serafina found Joe on the porch. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. He sat whittling a piece of wood into something that might become a bird. "Mind if I sit?" "Your porch too now." She settled beside him, close enough to feel warmth from his body, far enough to maintain proper distance. "Tell me about your parents." The knife stopped moving. Joe's breathing changed rhythm. "They're dead." "I know. Tom told me. But who were they when they lived?" Joe set down his whittling, stared out at the darkness beyond the porch light. "My father was a Buffalo soldier, 10th Cavalry, stationed at Fort Davis. My mother was Cherokee, worked as a translator." "How did they meet?" "She was guiding a patrol through Apache territory. He was the sergeant. They fell in love in the desert." His voice carried old pain wrapped in careful control. "What happened to them?" "Confederate raiders. War was over, but some men don't know when to quit. Found our cabin when I was 15. Killed them both while I was hunting." Serafina's heart clenched. She understood now. The locked room, the weapons, the haunted look in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I came home to smoke and blood, buried them both under the oak tree behind the house." "Is that why you came here? To forget?" "To remember. To build something they would be proud of." The night wind moved through the grass around them, carried the scent of sage and distant storms. They would be proud. Joe looked at her then. Really looked. Not at Mrs. Whitmore, the business arrangement. At Serafina, the woman who had stood up to a room full of powerful men. "You reminded me of my mother today. She never backed down from a fight worth having." "Is that good or bad?" "It's everything." The space between them felt charged as summer lightning. Serafina's pulse quickened. Joe's hand moved closer to hers on the wooden bench. A rider approached in the darkness. Hoofbeats drummed urgent against the earth. Joe stood and moved to the porch rail. His hand found the gun at his hip. Carlos emerged from the shadows, his horse lathered with sweat. "Jefe, Ryder came to town, asking questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "About the war, about your family, about old debts." Joe's face went hard as winter stone. The careful peace of the evening shattered. "Who was asking?" "Man called himself Smith, but the bartender knew him. Said his real name is Hawkins." The blood drained from Joe's face. His hand gripped the porch rail until his knuckles went white. "Bloody Bill Hawkins. See, he's coming, Jefe. Maybe tomorrow, maybe sooner." Joe turned to Serafina. In his eyes she saw the locked room, the weapons, the ghosts that would not rest. "Pack a bag. Carlos will take you to town." "I'm not leaving." "This isn't your fight." "It is now." The words surprised them both, but Serafina knew them for truth. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Hawkins changed everything. Joe's face turned to granite when he heard the name. Sleep abandoned him. He walked the ranch perimeter each night, checking shadows that might hide killers. 3 days passed without the promised confrontation. Joe grew harder with each sunrise, spoke less, ate little. His hands never strayed far from his weapons. Serafina watched him disappear into himself. The man who had taught her to ride became a stranger obsessed with ghosts. She tried to reach him, but he built walls faster than she could tear them down. "You need to eat." "Not hungry." "You need to sleep." "Can't." The 4th night she found him cleaning his guns on the kitchen table. Oil gleamed on metal parts laid out precise as surgery. His movements held ritual purpose. "Tell me about Hawkins." Joe's hands stilled. The cloth stopped moving across the rifle barrel. "Led a Confederate unit that kept fighting after surrender. Called themselves the Avenging Angels. Burned homesteads. Killed families. Made war on civilians." "What does he want with you?" "I testified at his court-martial. Put him in prison for 15 years. He got out 3 months ago." The truth settled between them, heavy as gravestone. Joe reassembled his rifle with practiced efficiency. Each piece clicked into place with deadly precision. "How many others were there that night?" "6 men. I've found 4 of them." The locked room made terrible sense now. Serafina understood the wanted posters, the weapons, the careful tracking of evil men. "Found them?" Joe's silence answered better than words. Justice delivered personal and final. Dawn brought news that cracked Joe's careful control. Hawkins had been seen at Miller's trading post 20 miles north, moving south toward the ranch. Joe saddled his horse before the sun cleared the mountains. "Don't follow me." "Joe." "I mean it, Serafina. This ends today." He rode out without looking back, left her standing in the yard with fear clawing at her throat. The empty ranch felt hollow as a dried skull. Serafina tried to distract herself with ledgers. Numbers blurred together, meaningless as scattered leaves. She tried cooking, burned the biscuits to charcoal, tried sewing, pricked her finger until blood spotted the fabric. Noon came and went. No word from Joe, no dust cloud on the horizon announcing his return. Evening arrived, painted in shades of worry and dread. Still no Joe. Serafina paced the porch until she wore grooves in the wooden planks. Carlos found her there when he returned from checking cattle. "Senora, you should come inside." "He's been gone all day. Jefe can take care of himself." What if Hawkins had more men? What if it was a trap? Carlos had no answers, only worried silence that matched her own. Night fell without bringing Joe home. Serafina sat by the window watching for riders that never came. Sleep felt impossible with her heart hammering fear against her ribs. The second day stretched endless as desert horizon. No Joe, no news, nothing but wind and worry and waiting. Serafina found herself in Joe's study, searched his papers for clues about where he might have gone, found maps marked with locations, dates written in margins, a careful hunter's journal tracking dangerous prey. The locked room called to her. She tried the handle knowing it would not turn. But knowledge lived behind that door, understanding of the man she had married. A hairpin from her dresser made an adequate key. The lock clicked open after patient work. The door swung wide on Joe's secrets. Wanted posters covered one wall. 6 faces stared back at her with dead eyes. 4 marked with red X marks, found and dealt with permanently. Hawkins's poster held center position. Reward money that could buy a small ranch. Crimes listed in careful script. Murder, arson, rape, torture. A monster wearing human skin. Weapons lined the opposite wall. Rifles, pistols, knives sharp enough to split moonbeams. Tools of justice or vengeance depending on perspective. A small table held personal items. Letters from territorial marshals thanking Joe for information. Newspaper clippings about mysterious deaths of wanted men. A journal documenting his hunt. Serafina read entries written in Joe's careful hand. Tracked his progress from grieving son to methodical hunter. Watched him transform from man to weapon over years of patient stalking. The final entry chilled her blood. "Hawkins knows I'm coming. Good. Time to finish what he started 15 years ago." The journal trembled in her hands. Joe had ridden out to die. Win or lose, he planned to end his hunt permanently. She closed the journal and backed from the room. Joe's secrets felt heavy as winter coats in summer heat. The man she was learning to love carried darkness that might consume them both. Day 3 brought Carlos with grim news. Found tracks near Devil's Canyon. 2 horses went in, none came out. "We have to look for him." "Too dangerous, Senora. If Jefe didn't make it out, we don't go in either." Serafina wanted to scream, wanted to ride out herself and search every canyon and gully. But Carlos spoke truth. She was no gunfighter, no tracker, no match for whatever waited in that rocky wasteland. That afternoon brought visitors to town. Big Pete Morrison and two other men Serafina didn't recognize. They rode past the ranch slow and deliberate. Let her see their faces, their weapons, their intentions. Carlos saw them too. Posted men with rifles around the house. Sent Tom into town for supplies and information. Prepared for siege. What do they want? You, Senora. With Jefe gone, you're unprotected. I have you and the men. We'll fight. But Pete has friends, money, law on his side if he plays it right. Night fell heavy with threat. Serafina lay in her bed listening to every sound. Wind in the eaves, cattle lowing in distant pastures, footsteps of guards patrolling the yard. Dawn brought the sound of many horses. Serafina looked out to see Pete Morrison leading a dozen men toward the house, all armed, all grinning with cruel anticipation. Carlos met them in the yard, his rifle held casual but ready. You got business here, Morrison? Come to collect what's owed. Whitmore bought damaged goods. I'm here to return them for refund. Senora is not for sale. Everything's for sale, Carlos. Question is price. Pete's men spread out, surrounded the house. Carlos whistled sharp and high. Joe's men appeared from cover positions, rifles trained on the intruders. Mexican standoff written in lead and gunpowder. Ride away, Pete, while you still can. Don't think I will. See, I got legal papers here. Says the marriage ain't valid. Whitmore being dead and all. Serafina's blood turned to ice water. She stepped onto the porch with Joe's rifle in her hands. My husband isn't dead. Ain't he? Been gone 3 days. Devil's Canyon don't give up its secrets easy. Pete's smile showed broken teeth and evil intentions. Even if Joe don't come back, marriage stands. I'm his legal widow. Widow of a breed ain't worth much. Sides, I got papers say different. He pulled folded documents from his coat. Grimm's signature marked the bottom in flowing script. Banker says your marriage was fraud, conducted under false pretenses, makes it null and void. Grimm has no authority over marriages. Got authority over debts. Says you still owe money on your guardian's gambling. Interest been piling up while you played house with that half-breed. The trap revealed itself complete and perfect. Grimm had planned this from the beginning. The auction, the marriage, Joe's absence, all pieces in a game designed to put her back on the market. How much? $1,000, plus interest, plus fees. Call it $1,500 total. Impossible sum. More money than most people saw in 10 years. Don't have it. Then you come with me. Work off the debt proper. Pete's meaning rang clear as church bells. Serafina's grip tightened on the rifle. Her finger found the trigger. I'll die first. Suit yourself. Been wanting a reason to clean out this nest of troublemakers anyway. The standoff stretched taut as fiddle string. One wrong move would paint the yard red. Thunder rolled across clear sky. No storm clouds darkened the horizon. The sound came again. Hoofbeats. Many horses riding hard. A column of dust rose from the south road. Pete's men shifted nervous in their saddles. Carlos smiled grim as winter. Cavalry patrol, he announced. Right on time. 20 soldiers in blue uniforms crested the hill. Led by a captain with silver bars and serious expression, they deployed around Pete's men with military precision. What's the problem here? Pete's bluster crumbled fast as his legal papers. No problem, Captain. Just conducting business. Business looks mighty armed for peaceful transaction. The captain's eyes took in the scene. Armed men surrounding a house, woman with rifle on the porch, Mexican vaqueros ready for war. You men are trespassing on private property. Suggest you move along. Pete wanted to argue. His men wanted to fight, but 20 trained soldiers changed the mathematics of confrontation. This ain't over. Yes, it is. The voice came from the road behind the soldiers. Joe Whitmore rode into view leading a second horse. Bloody bandage wrapped his left arm, clothes torn and dusty, but alive. gloriously alive. Seraphina's heart soared higher than meadowlarks. Joe was home. Pete's face went white as fresh snow. His men reached for weapons. The soldiers' rifles swung to cover them. "I said move along." This time Pete obeyed. His men followed in sullen retreat, empty threats trailing behind them mixed with dust and defeat. Joe dismounted slow and careful, favored his wounded arm. Seraphina ran to him without thought for dignity or appearance. "You're hurt." "I'm alive, that's enough." She wanted to throw herself into his arms, wanted to cry and rage and demand explanations. Instead, she helped him to the porch. Let her touch say what words could not. "Hawkins? Won't be bothering anyone again." Joe's tone closed the subject final as grave dirt. The hunt was over. The ghosts were quiet. But other storms gathered on the horizon. Grimm's papers, Pete's threats, legal traps that bullets could not solve. The war was far from finished. Joe's wound needed tending. Seraphina cleaned the bullet graze with gentle hands. Her touch steadied his breathing, calmed the tremor in his fingers. How bad was it? Bad enough. Hawkins didn't go quiet. Joe's eyes held shadows that would never fully lift. But something had changed. The hunting fever had broken. The ghosts were finally quiet. "It's over." "Not yet." Grimm's still moving pieces on the board. Seraphina showed him the forged papers. Pete's threats. The legal trap designed to reclaim her. Joe studied the documents with care. His jaw tightened as he read. $1,500 for gambling debts that never existed. Can we fight it in court? Courts favor men with money. Grimm has both. The evening air felt heavy with approaching storm. Real clouds gathered on the horizon. Thunder rumbled distant promises of rain and cleansing. "There's another way." Joe's voice carried new resolve. Not the bitter vengeance of his hunting days. Something cleaner, more purposeful. What way? Truth, spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. That night, they planned. Joe's men gathered around the kitchen table. Maps spread between coffee cups and determination. Each man carried scars from unfair fights. All understood the stakes. Grimm thinks he's safe behind his banker's desk and legal papers. Carlos spat tobacco juice into the spittoon. "What's the plan, Jefe?" "Sunday service. Whole town will be there. We present our case public. Let folks decide who they believe. Grimm controls the preacher. Preacher answers to God first, money second." Joe's confidence felt solid as bedrock. Seraphina studied the faces around the table, saw loyalty deeper than blood, friendship forged in shared hardship. What if they won't listen? Then we make them listen. Saturday brought preparation. Seraphina gathered evidence with the thoroughness of a prosecuting attorney. Joe's ledgers showing honest dealings, testimonials from satisfied business partners, letters from territorial officials praising his character. Most importantly, she found Mama Ruth's real papers, hidden in the old woman's Bible, financial records showing no debts, no gambling, no reason for Grimm's claims. The smoking gun that would blow holes in the banker's lies. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. The storm had passed in the night, left the air clean and the ground soft. New beginning weather. Joe dressed careful in his best suit. Seraphina wore her wedding dress. They would face their accusers as husband and wife, united against whatever came. The church filled early. Word had spread about the confrontation. Folks came for justice or entertainment. Both promised to be memorable. Grimm sat in the front pew. Pete Morrison flanked him on one side, 2 hired guns on the other. They looked confident as cats with cream. Joe and Seraphina entered together. Heads turned. Whispers followed them down the aisle. They took seats in the back, close to the door, close to escape if needed. Preacher Williams began his sermon on truth and consequences. His words carried weight beyond their usual Sunday morning comfort. Everyone understood the subtext. After the closing hymn, Grimm stood up. His voice carried across the silent church. Friends, we have a matter of community concern to address. He pulled out the forged papers, made his case with a lawyer's skill and a snake's sincerity, painted Joe as a predator who had taken advantage of an innocent woman, Serafina as a debtor trying to escape rightful obligations. The congregation listened with growing unease. Some nodded along with Grimm's presentation. Others looked skeptical. When Grimm finished, Joe rose to his feet. His voice came quiet but clear. "May I respond to these charges?" Preacher Williams nodded. The church held its breath. "Mr. Grimm claims my wife owes gambling debts. Here's Ruth Thompson's Bible. Her financial records inside. No gambling, no debts, no truth to his claims." Joe held up the evidence. "Let it speak for itself." "He claims our marriage is fraud. Here's 12 men who will testify to my character, business partners who trust my word, officials who respect my service." The tide began to turn. Faces in the congregation showed new understanding. Serafina stood beside her husband. Her voice rang clear as church bells. "Mr. Grimm forged those papers. I can prove it." She produced samples of Mama Ruth's real handwriting, compared it to the gambling "I owe us." The differences were obvious to anyone with eyes. Ruth Thompson never gambled, never owed debts, never signed these papers. Grimm's face flushed red as fresh blood. His careful trap was crumbling. "That proves nothing. Any woman could forge documents to support her story." "Then explain this." Serafina pulled out her final piece of evidence. Bank records showing large withdrawals from the town treasury, all signed by Grimm, all dated after Ruth's death. "You've been stealing from the town, used fake debts to cover your tracks, tried to silence the only witness." The church erupted in angry voices. Grimm's supporters melted away. Pete Morrison edged toward the door. "She's lying, trying to destroy a respected businessman." "Then let's ask the territorial marshal what he thinks." The voice came from the church entrance. Marshal James Brady stepped inside, badge gleaming on his chest, hand resting on his gun. "Been investigating reports of embezzlement. Seems Mrs. Whitmore has evidence I need to see." Grimm tried to run, made it 3 steps before Carlos tripped him. The banker hit the floor hard. His stolen money scattered across the church boards. Pete Morrison drew his gun. Joe was faster. His Colt appeared in his hand, smooth as silk. Pete reconsidered his options and slowly holstered his weapon. Smart choice. The marshal collected evidence, arrested Grimm and his conspirators. Justice served clean and legal. Outside the church, townspeople approached Joe and Serafina. Apologies mixed with congratulations. Respect earned through courage and truth. "Reckon the Cattlemen's Association might reconsider your application." The voice belonged to Samuel Hayes, the association's president. His hat was in his hands, his pride swallowed for the greater good. "We'll see." Joe's answer carried no bitterness, no triumph, just quiet satisfaction. 6 months later, the ranch thrived beyond all expectations. Joe's membership in the Cattlemen's Association opened new markets, new opportunities, new respect. Serafina's school for ranch children operated out of the old church. She taught reading and writing to students of every color. Education as the great equalizer. Their marriage had transformed from business arrangement to true partnership. Love grown from shared struggle and mutual respect. They sat on their porch watching sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. The same porch where they had first begun to know each other, where walls had crumbled and trust had grown. "Think you made a good bid that day?" Serafina's question carried laughter in its depths. "Best investment I ever made." Joe's arm tightened around her shoulders, pulled her close against the evening chill. The wind moved through the grass around them, carried the scent of sage and distant rain, whispered promises of seasons yet to come. In the distance, cattle lowed peaceful in green pastures. Joe's men finished their work and headed home to families of their own. The ranch settled into evening quiet. They had built something lasting, something good. something worthy of the struggles that had brought them together. The auction block in Redemption Creek stood empty now, no longer a place of shame and suffering, just weathered wood waiting for some better purpose. Justice had been served, love had conquered fear, truth had triumphed over lies. The story was complete, the circle closed, the future stretched ahead bright with possibility. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.